Imagine paying dues every single month just to be told, your own motorcycle belongs to somebody else's kid because that's more neighborly. What would you do? Hand over the keys or stand your ground on your own driveway? It was a soft Saturday morning. The kind where the light looks like honey on the porches and the sprinklers make that steady whisper down the block. I was on my steps with a mug of black coffee when a teenager cut across my lawn like the sidewalk had gone missing. He didn't knock. He didn't say, "Good morning." He just stopped in front of the Harley parked under my oak and said, plain as day, "I'll take that one." I blinked. "Come again," he pointed, like my bike was a toaster at a yard sale. "Mom said, you're giving this to me." She talked to the HOA. A breath later, I spotted her Karen standing at the curb with her arms folded, sunglasses on, chin lifted like she was about to judge a parade. She gave this little wave that wasn't friendly so much as triumphant. "Son," I told the kid, "I think you're mixed up." He wasn't. He'd been coached. She said you don't ride it much. And the noise, it's bad for the neighborhood vibe. Let me be crystal. I've had that Harley for over a decade. I tuned it myself. The chrome isn't just chrome to me. It's miles, and sweat, and stories that smell like gasoline in summer. Nobody, I said, is taking my bike. I walked down the grass to Karen. Explain. She smiled that thin smile people wear when they already decided how this ends. We've had complaints, noise, aesthetics, and prolonged driveway storage. The board agreed there's a better fit for that motorcycle, especially for a young driver who'll treat it with respect. You mean your son? Exactly. I actually laughed. A short, dry sound. You've lost the plot. Her smile didn't move. If you won't be reasonable, I'll escalate this. At the time, I didn't know what escalate meant in Karen speak. I figured it meant another passive-aggressive note about my mailbox or the length of my lawn. I was wrong. That afternoon, I rolled the Harley down the drive for a quick loop just a couple miles around the lake. Nothing dramatic. Sun on my back. Wind in my jacket. That deep purr that settles under your ribs. When I pulled in, 2 police cruisers followed, tires crunching the gravel like they owned the place. "Sir," one officer called. "Step away from the motorcycle." What? Step away now." I set the kickstand and put my hands up. "Is there a problem? We got a report about stolen property." The first officer said, "Local resident claims you unlawfully took possession of a motorcycle intended for her minor son." Behind them, here came Karen with the kid, walking like she'd solved a mystery. "That's it," she said, pointing. "He promised to donate it." Then he reneged. "That's theft. It would have been funny if it hadn't been my life." "This bike is mine," I said. "I've got the title and registration inside. Stay here." The second officer said, "Tell us where it is." I did. They went inside after I granted permission and came out with a worn manila folder. The first officer flipped through the papers, nodded, and handed them back. "It's his," he told Karen. "Title and registration are clean." Her mouth pressed into a tiny hyphen. The kid looked confused, then angry. "This isn't fair," he said. I said no such thing." I cut in, keeping my voice steady. The officers left. No ticket, no warning. Just 2 tired men who knew they'd been dragged into a private tantrum. As the cruisers turned out, Karen leaned toward me and said, "Lo, if you won't be a good neighbor, you'll learn what happens." She did not mean a friendly bake sale. By midweek, I found a letter taped to my door with the HOA letterhead like a stamp of holy authority. Notice of violation, community disruption, and failure to comply with courtesy standards. There were paragraphs about harmonious aesthetics and driveway storage limits and engine decibel concerns, mixed with a brand new phrase, misleading statements to minors regarding property transfers. I read it twice, felt my jaw tighten, and set it on the kitchen counter next to the coffee maker like it might contaminate the table. I am not a fighter by temperament. I do my work, pay my taxes, keep my hedges neat. But there's a line between rules and power trips. And that letter had both feet on my side of it. I called Mark, an old friend from our veterans group days who now worked at the state attorney's office. We're not bar buddies, but he's the guy you call when the ground starts moving under your boots. Lay it out, he said. So I did. The kid, the driveway, the police, the letter. He exhaled. She's trying to use the association to engineer a private property transfer. That's not just petty, it's coercive. Do you have anything on camera, doorbell cam? Thank God. I pulled up the archive, and there it was. The kid stepping onto my driveway, pointing at the bike, saying, "Mom said you'd give it to me." Audio clear as a bell. I exported it. Then, I did what Mark told me, wrote a statement of facts, with dates spelled out, times spelled out. No adjectives. Just the meat and bones. I scanned my title, the registration, printed still frames from the video, even tossed in a photo of me with the Harley from years back, same paint job, same chrome, same man standing proud behind it. Keep everything, Mark said. Every letter, every email. If she calls, write down the time and what was said. Don't escalate. Let the record talk. For a few days, quiet. Then the whispers began. The neighbor 2 doors down, Lydia, sweet woman with a porch swing and a rescue terrier, brought over a peach cobbler and a story about Karen threatening her over the color of a front door wreath. Then Ben, the retired firefighter across the street, mentioned Karen had tried to fine him for a flag he'd flown on Memorial Day. It all felt like smoke from small fires. That's the thing about smoke, you can ignore 1 wisp, maybe even 2. But after a while, you can't deny the house is getting hazy. The next association meeting fell on a Thursday evening. I usually avoid those, 'cause they're where good evenings go to die. But this time, I pressed a clean shirt, gathered my folder, and went. The room smelled like dry erase markers and stale cookies. Folding chairs, a cheap gavel, a bulletin board with a list of gentle reminders that looked like a ransom note written by a control freak. Karen was already there, perched at the end of the table with 2 board members leaning her way. Her son sat behind her with that teenage slouch that says the world is owed, and late with the payment. When I walked in, Karen's smile sliced the air. Oh, he came! The president. A soft-spoken man named Bill, who always looked like he was about to apologize for something he didn't do, banged the gavel gently. New business. Karen's hand jerked up. I'd like to request action against Mr. Owens, she announced, loud enough for the back row. For a verbal commitment he failed to honor, for causing distress to a minor, and for repeated engine noise violations. There it was. She laid out her version like a bedtime story. You tell yourself to stay angry. I stayed still and let it roll. When she finished, Bill adjusted his glasses and nodded at me. Would you like to respond? I stood, placed the folder on the table, and opened it with both hands. Yes. I passed around the printed stills of my doorbell footage. The kid, on my driveway, arm outstretched at my motorcycle like a shopping mall, Santa pointing to which gift is his. Faces leaned over the paper. The room hummed with a low murmur that felt like relief and surprise mixing in equal parts. "This is my title," I said, laying down the documents. "This is my registration. This is the police check from last Saturday when officers confirmed I'm the owner. And this," I tapped, "the stack is a timeline of events with dates and times, including the HOA letter I received alleging I misled a minor." Bill read quietly, and for the first time I saw something like backbone settle behind his eyes. "Karen," he said, not unkindly. "The evidence suggests the association's process might have been used improperly." She tried to speak. He lifted a hand. "Enough for now. We'll review." I didn't gloat. Honestly, I felt tired. I went home and sat on the porch, listening to the crickets. I thought maybe that would be the end. Like when a thunderstorm passes and the frogs come out and everyone forgives the sky. But control doesn't dissolve with a single gavel tap. It calcifies. It finds new tools. The following Tuesday, a thick envelope arrived from a law office, with a name you'd recognize if you watched late-night commercials. "Cease and desist," it declared, accusing me of emotional manipulation of a minor and creating a hostile microenvironment. It demanded I surrender the motorcycle as restitution or face civil action. I read it twice. Then I laughed once, short and humorless, and called Mark. "She's bluffing," he said. "But we'll answer. Keep your tone dry as toast. Facts, not fury." So we drafted a response, a precise letter pointing out the false statements, attaching the timeline and copies of everything I already had, and putting the association on notice about potential harassment claims should they continue to be used as a cudgel. We didn't pound the table. We just pointed at the table and said, "This is a table." Days passed. The law firm went quiet. Karen didn't. She tried new angles. She wrote to the board about an abandoned vehicle visible from the street. She complained to animal control that my garden fountain attracted mosquitoes. Which, I mean, yeah. Water attracts living things. Welcome to Earth. She even told a few neighbors that I'd threatened her boy. I didn't chase rumors. I watered my tomatoes and waved to folks and kept the Harley clean. Lydia's porch swing became a little confessional. People came by with cookies, casseroles, and stories. A couple said they'd been warned about backyard grills. One man said he got a letter for leaving a ladder leaned up for more than 2 sunsets. It was like someone had collected tiny annoyances and weaponized them. All roads led to the same person. There's not a spreadsheet for that kind of thing. But there is a feeling that gathers in a neighborhood like when the wind changes before rain. Then came the tow truck. It was a bright morning. Cicadas loud. The air butter thick. I heard diesel before I saw it. A flatbed easing down the street like a shark fin. It stopped in front of my driveway. The driver hopped out, scanned a paper, and said, "I'm here for the motorcycle." "Who called you association request?" he said, pointing to a name that wasn't mine. "Do you have a court order?" I asked. He didn't. He had a clipboard and a habit of shrugging. "Look, man, I just go where they send me. Not today, you don't." I planted myself in front of the Harley. Polite as a preacher. Solid as a fence post. Karen appeared like a stage cue, clapping her hands together as if she'd just unveiled a surprise cake. "Wonderful," she said. "Please remove that nuisance. He's had appropriate notice." I texted Mark, then called the non-emergency police line. 2 officers arrived, you know. Different pair this time. Same weary look. I explained. The tow guy explained. Karen tried to explain and somehow made it sound like I'd signed over my soul and misplaced the receipt. "Ma'am," the officer said, "private property can't be towed without the owner's consent or a lawful order." "Do you have one?" She did not. The flatbed rolled away, empty. Karen watched it go like she was watching a ship sail without her luggage. She went inside. Curtains moved across the street as neighbors peeked, like the whole block had turned into a single, enormous eye. That evening, Ben shuffled over with a stack of papers and a straight look. "We're done," he said. "It's time." He set a petition on my porch table. Motion to recall a board member for repeated misuse of authority and harassment. Lines of signatures already marched down the page. Lydia had started it. Folks from the far cul-de-sac had signed. Names I didn't know. Names I did. A soft fury hummed through those pen strokes. The kind that says, "We tried, nice and nice, did not work." I didn't start the rebellion. I just parked my bike where it had always slept, and refused to let someone else write the story of it. But sometimes, one no teaches 50 people how big a yes to themselves can be. We delivered the petition the next day. Karen didn't come to the special meeting. Maybe she thought it was beneath her. Maybe she finally realized people had stopped nodding along. Bill called the vote. The tally was not close. The gavel fell. The room exhaled. I walked home under a sky the color of a ripe peach. The kind of sky that makes you believe in fresh starts. The Harley gleamed by the oak. I ran a rag along the tank. Not because it needed it, but because rituals soothe us. And the day had been loud in ways a man feels in his bones. Here's the truth I keep circling in my head. And sorry. I'm gonna say it plain. HOAs can help. Trash day can run smooth. Holiday lights can look like a postcard. But there's a line between keeping up the block and keeping people under your thumb. That line, for me, is spelled driveway, title, keys, and dignity. If you're standing where I stood, if there's a Karen leaning on rules like they're a crowbar, do the unglamorous work. Document everything. Write down dates in full. Not just the day. Save emails. Install a camera if you haven't. Speak gently and keep your temper. Even when your blood is running hot, facts make quiet. Steady allies. And allies. You know. Win wars nobody meant to start. I didn't hate the kid. By the way, he's a teenager. He got handed a script and told to read his lines. One day, he'll buy something with his own money and feel that private joy you can't transfer on a clipboard. He'll get it then. We all do. Sooner or later. So, yeah, the Harley's still here. Weekends. I thumb the starter and hear that familiar thrum. Like a heartbeat turned outward. Neighbors lift a hand when I roll by. Karen's house is still on the corner. Her blinds are still white. The world didn't end. It just turned a small corner toward sense. What would you do if a stranger's kid tried to claim your ride while his mom waved from the curb and the HOA tried to make it official? Would you give in to keep the peace? Or hold the line so the peace actually means something? Drop your thoughts below. Anyone else had a board try this kind of stunt? I didn't sleep much the week after the recall vote. Not because I was worried, more like my mind had a backlog of noise to file. When your quiet life gets dragged into a stage play you never auditioned for, it takes a minute to hear your own thinking again. On Monday, a letter arrived from the interim board. It was simple and, honestly, decent. They apologized for procedural lapses and said they'd review complaint protocols. They also asked for a meeting to reset expectations around common area use and noise. Fair enough. I believe in neighborly. I also believe in boundaries that don't move with one person's moods. We met in the clubhouse under flickering fluorescent lights. Bill was there. along with 2 new volunteers and the association lawyer, a woman named Carla who spoke with the careful clarity of someone who's read more bylaws than I've seen sunsets. Carla said, the quiet part out loud. Complaints should never be a personal weapon. We failed you there. She slid a draft policy across the table. We're tightening thresholds for enforcement, clarifying what counts as a nuisance, and requiring board review for any action that impacts private property. Good, I said. Add one more thing. If someone tries to tow from private property without a court order, again, there should be consequences. Carla nodded. Agreed. I walked home lighter. Lydia waved from her swing. Ben was hosing down his driveway and hollered something about burgers on Friday. Life can be so stubbornly normal, even when it's been wrung out. By the end of the week, normal had company. Karen posted a long message in the neighborhood forum. Lots of windy language about betrayal and ungrateful residents and lax leadership. She called me a bad influence. She said the petitioners were destroying community standards. A few people chimed in with soft-serve support. Most didn't. The thread sank like a stone. The kid, though he showed up again, came by on his bicycle in the late afternoon, circled slow, and finally put a sneaker down in my driveway. Hey, he said, voice half thin, half brave. Can I ask you something? Sure. Why won't you just admit it's too loud? I leaned a hip against the porch rail. Too loud for what? For, like, peace. I thought of the letter. The tow truck. The police on Saturday morning. Peace hadn't been the goal. Compliance had. But I also heard the honest question under his pose. I took a breath and answered the boy version. Not the Karen version. Engines make noise, I said. So do leaf blowers and lawnmowers and kids playing tag and someone hammering a fence. Noise inside reasonable hours is part of the deal when you live around other humans. The board's gonna set clearer rules. I'll live by them. Will you? His chin dipped. Maybe. It's not wrong to want quiet. I added. It's wrong to take what isn't yours and call it community. He looked at the Harley. Then at me. It is a nice bike, he said, almost smiling. It's a good teacher, I said. It reminds you that balance comes from your own hands. He pedaled off. I watched him go and hoped some small gear had shifted in there. A few evenings later, I took the Harley out the long way toward the river. There's a stretch where the road tucks between pines, and the air smells like sap and hot dirt. I thought about how a machine can be a mirror. If you jerk, the bike jerks. If you relax, it floats. You steer what you become. You become what you do with your hands. I came back to find a note tucked under my doormat. No letterhead this time. No legal tone. Just a folded sheet of lined paper. Inside I was wrong. K. I stood there, surprised, like someone had turned the radio down in a loud room. Maybe it was her. Maybe it wasn't. I didn't frame it or snap a picture. I slid it into the back of my folder and made dinner. Life, as it does, reassembled itself. Trash days and grocery runs. Ben's burgers on Friday. Smoke curling up into the humid sky. Lydia's terrier chasing a red ball along the sidewalk and refusing to bring it back. The interim board held a listening session where people spoke about grievances like they were laying down bricks. Carla wrote a revised policy that read like a fence, not hostile. Just clear. Still. Every story leaves a seam. You can run your fingers along it, even after the fabric looks smooth. My seam was this for a while there. Strangers got to decide what my property meant. Not just its shape or color, but its meaning. A thing can be an eyesore to one person and a memory engine to another. When rules flatten that difference, neighborhoods get brittle. A week after the new policy passed, Bill knocked. He looked less apologetic and more human. We're setting up a committee to handle disputes before they explode, he said. Mediation, ground rules, that sort of thing. Would you consider joining me? I said, pointing to my chest. You want the guy with the motorcycle and the thick folder. We want the guy who kept receipts and didn't shout, he said, almost smiling. And, we could use someone who knows how to say no without turning it into a war. I said I'd try it for a season. I didn't want to be the hall monitor. I just didn't want anyone else waking up to a tow truck on their sunniest morning. The first mediation was a fence dispute. A couple argued about an inch or two into a flower bed. Which, sure, to outsiders sounds small. But when you plant roses, you measure love in inches. I listened. I asked each one to spell out what the fence meant to them, apart from wood and nails. Turned out, it wasn't about the fence. It almost never is. We walked the line together and found a solution that looked, honestly, like the old one, but with permission attached. They thanked each other in that stiff way people do when they're not ready to like you again, but they're done disliking you for now. Small win. Still a win. Now and then, I'd see Karen drive by. Windows up. No waves. I didn't hate her. I didn't forgive her. Exactly. Either. I just let the story be a story that had moved on. I hoped the same for her. People cling when they're scared. Control feels like a life raft. Until it flips, and you're the one gulping water. Maybe she found her way to shore. Maybe she's still out there paddling at the air. On a breezy Sunday. The kid, the same boy, walked up in a helmet. He held it in both hands like it was a fresh idea. I'm taking a motorcycle safety course, he said. Cheeks pink, with either pride or nerves. Mom's not into it. But I saved up. My uncle's helping. I thought you'd approve. I do, I said. I more than approve. You're doing it the right way. Can I ask about balance? I pointed to the Harley. Sit, I said. He looked at me. Then at the bike. Then back at me. I won't start it, I promised. Just sit. Feel the weight. He swung a leg over. Careful, like he was stepping onto a dock. He settled. The machine dipped, then steadied. His shoulders loosened. That feeling, I said. That's you meeting gravity. Don't fight it. Work with it. He nodded. Eyes wide. It's heavier than I thought. Most things worth having are. He grinned a real one this time and handed back the helmet. Thanks. Ride safe, I said. And tell your uncle to text me if he wants a second set of eyes before you buy anything. He left lighter than he came. I watched him go and felt something in my chest unclench. Sometimes an apology isn't a word. It's a better next step. Months rolled like low waves. Fall edged in and painted the oak leaves, the color of rust and cinnamon. The Harley looked different under that light, older in the good way. Like a leather jacket that finally fits your shoulders exactly right. Folks started treating the mediation committee like a pressure valve. Fewer letters. More conversations. The neighborhood forum got quieter, which is the highest compliment you can pay a forum. One evening, Carla called. You're in the minutes, she said. We're using your case to train new board members on what not to do. You mean how not to let one person turn the bylaws into a stick? Exactly, she said. Also, we're adding a step. Any complaint that involves a minor has to go through a special review that includes both families. No more, he said. She said, via email. Good. I said. Less theater. More truth. Later that night, I found myself on the porch with a fresh cup of coffee, and that old restlessness that shows up when the house gets quiet. I thought about the word neighbor. It's supposed to mean the person next to you. Sure. But the best neighborhoods are more than adjacency. They're consent. We choose each other. Even when we don't like each other much. Because the alternative is loneliness with a lawn. The kid texted a picture from his safety course. He wore a newbie grin and a borrowed jacket. And the caption said, "Did the figure 8 without putting a foot down." I typed back, "Proud of you." And put the phone face down like a period. A few days after, a letter came from Karen. Not certified. Not threatening. Just an envelope with my name in a looping hand that tried to hide its nerves. Inside, I'm selling the house. Moving closer to my sister. We don't have to like each other. But I do hope you'll accept this small apology for the mess. A gift card fell out. Cheap as an apology and gentler, too. I didn't need the money. I didn't frame the note. I put both in the folder anyway. Life rarely gives you the apology you want. It sometimes gives you the apology it can. On her last day, a moving truck swallowed her furniture. And the sun fell behind the roofline like it was tired of watching. I stood on my sidewalk and watched the block become itself again. She didn't come over. I didn't go over. The kid waved from the passenger seat. I waved back. The truck turned the corner. And the sound of it left the street. You don't realize how tall a shadow is until you step out of it. That night I rolled the Harley down the drive. Thumbed the starter. And let the engine catch. It purred, not loud. Not quiet, just honest. I took the long loop. It felt less like victory and more like breath. The new family moved in 2 weeks later, a nurse named Maria. Her partner, Theo. And a little girl who colored on the porch and sang made-up songs about the weather. On their second evening, Theo came over with a six-pack and asked if Friday burgers were a real thing or a neighborhood myth. I told him to bring buns and an opinion about baseball. He laughed. "I can do one of those," he said. "I'll fake the other." As the grill hissed, we talked about rules that help and rules that hurt. Theo said something that stuck. Any rule that can be used to bully will be used to bully. So you build in friction. Not to block fairness, but to slow down the mean. Exactly, I said. Friction saves friendships. When the plates were scraped and the sky turned navy, Lydia said what we were all thinking. "I'm glad we didn't just try to be nice," she murmured. "Nice would have let it keep happening. Kindness with a spine." Ben said, lifting his glass. "That's the ticket." We clinked paper cups like it was crystal. It was enough. Some weekends, I ride out to the Veterans Hall with a few old friends and drink bad coffee and tell stories that grow a little taller every time. They ask about the HOA saga. I tell it shorter now. 'Cause the heat's gone out of it. We kept records. I say, we voted. The end. They laugh. I do, too. It's not the whole story, but it's the true shape of it. And when the road gets quiet, when the wind presses cool against my sleeves and the sky opens wide, a thought slips in that I keep like a coin in my pocket. Peace isn't the absence of conflict. It's the presence of agreed-upon lines. If you don't draw them together, someone will draw them for you, usually right over your driveway. If you've read this far, maybe you're standing on your own porch with your own version of a Harley in the crosshairs, your flag, your garden, your work truck, Your kid's basketball hoop. Maybe there's a Karen in your story. Maybe you're tired. Maybe you're the type who'd rather mow 2 lawns than knock on 1 door. I get it. Me too. Most days. Here's what I learned the hard way. In plain English. First, document like your future self will be your lawyer. Dates in full words. Times spelled out. Names. Exact phrases. Cameras are not about catching people. They're about remembering without arguing. Second, never escalate the volume. It feels good for, like, 1 second. And then you've given away the one thing you had that they didn't: credibility. Speak like you're writing to a judge you respect, even when you're talking to someone you don't. Third, find your allies early. There's people who think they're alone until someone says, "Me too." A porch swing and a pie can do more than a megaphone. Fourth, insist the board build friction where meanness could slide. Require review before action. Require mediation before fines when it's neighbor versus neighbor. Put sunlight on the process. Paperwork can be a wall or a window. Make it a window. Fifth, remember that kids are bystanders to grown-up storms. Don't make them collateral. If you can teach one something better than what they've been taught, do it. Quietly. And finally, keep a thing in your life that reminds you who you are outside of meetings and letters and petty power games. For me, it's the bike. For you, maybe it's a garden, or a guitar, or Sunday pot roast with too much rosemary. Hold on to that. A person with a center is harder to push over. So, yeah, imagine a stranger's kid strolling up your driveway and saying, "I'll take that," because his mom and a board use the word community like a crowbar. What do? You don't swing back. You plant your feet. You keep records. You gather your neighbors. You vote when you have to. You ride out when the sun's right. You make your peace mean something. What would you do here? Anyone else have an HOA? Try to reassign your stuff, or nickel and dime you into surrender? Tell me your story, messy parts and all. I'm listening. We all are.